Jax's revenge domain.
He called my dry dock a relic and fired me. It was the only deep water repair facility his company's fleet could use within 250 miles. I'm sitting in this glass conference room on the third floor of Gulf Shore Industrial's corporate building, and the kid across from me hasn't looked up from his laptop since I walked in. Bradford Pierce, 27 years old, MBA from Wharton. Navy suit, no tie, white sneakers that cost more than my truck payment. Hair styled with some product that's already losing the fight against Houston humidity. The whole room smells like new carpet and expensive cologne. Through the window behind him, I can see my yard, the real one. A crane lifting a prop assembly off the Coastal Ranger. Blue flash of a welding arc on the hull. A tugboat pushing a barge toward the channel, its horn low and long. Men in hard hats moving with purpose across 45 acres of steel and concrete and salt water. That yard's alive. This room feels dead. An HR rep stands near the door holding a tablet against her chest like armor. She won't look at me either. They all think they know how this goes. Bradford finally glances up, not at my face, somewhere around my collar. Vincent, I'll cut right to the chase. Gulf Shore Industrial is transitioning to automated marine operations. We're partnering with Digital Marine Solutions out of Singapore for all fleet maintenance going forward. He talks like he's reading from a PowerPoint slide. His voice has that practiced corporate tone, the kind they teach you in business school. Your position as Director of Marine Operations is being eliminated as part of this strategic transformation. Frankly, that facility down there is bleeding money. It's outdated infrastructure. The HR lady shifts her weight. Her tablet shakes slightly in her hands. Modern fleet operators don't need physical dry docks. Bradford continues, warming to his theme now. It's legacy thinking. Predictive maintenance using AI and IoT sensors is the future. We're moving to a global sourcing model. He pauses, looks directly at me for the first time. You're a Navy guy stuck in the past, Vincent. This is how we build a 21st century company. I look at him for a long moment. Then I look through the window at the dry dock, 400 feet of deep water bay built to service everything from fishing boats to Panamax-class vessels. I rebuilt those keel blocks myself in 2015. Replaced the entire ballast pump system in 2019. Poured new concrete on the approach ramp with my own crew in 2012. Every bolt, every weld, every system modification bears my signature. 23 vessels in the Gulf Shore fleet depend on that facility for inspection, maintenance, and Coast Guard certification. Without it, they can't legally operate. I understand, I said. That was it. 2 words. Bradford's eyebrows twitched just barely. He expected an argument, maybe a speech, maybe begging. He got 2 words and a man picking up a manila folder from the chair beside him, the folder I'd brought because I already knew what was coming. I stood, walked out. The HR rep stepped aside like I was carrying something dangerous. My name is Vincent Castillo. I'm 48 years old. I spent 6 years as a Navy Seabee, construction battalion, before coming to Gulf Shore Industrial 20 years ago. Started as a welding supervisor, worked my way up through every position in that yard. Everything I know about marine construction, offshore platform fabrication, and hurricane-resistant welding, I learned with my hands or from technical manuals I read on my own time in break rooms that smelled like cutting torch gas and burnt coffee. Gulf Shore hired me at 28 because I was the only man who answered a 2 a.m. emergency call about structural damage on their offshore platform during Hurricane Rita and had temporary supports welded in place by dawn. I drove 90 minutes through wind and rain, set up under work lights on a pitching deck, and ran emergency welds that held until permanent repairs could be made. The facility manager called the company owner at 6 a.m. and said, "Hire this one before someone else does." Every promotion since came the same way. Supervisor to foreman, foreman to superintendent, superintendent to assistant director to director of marine operations. I'm the only certified offshore platform inspector in the company. 20 years, and not one structure has failed inspection on my watch. Not one. The dry dock was a disaster when I first saw it in 2003. Previous operator went bankrupt after Hurricane Ike in 2008. Couldn't afford the repairs, couldn't keep trained staff, couldn't maintain client relationships. The facility sat empty for 2 years, rust on every surface. Ballast system shot, keel blocks cracked from neglect. The overhead cranes hadn't moved in so long their cables had corroded in place. I spent the better part of a decade making it the premier marine facility on the upper Texas coast, deep water bay capable of handling anything in the commercial fleet. Full-service repair shops with overhead gantry cranes I designed and installed myself. Parts warehouse stocked with OEM components for every vessel class we service. Emergency fuel depot with direct pipeline access so we never have to wait for truck deliveries. 27 ships depend on that one facility. Every hull scraping, every prop repair, every Coast Guard inspection, every emergency dry docking runs through my yard. When Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017, we were the only facility between New Orleans and Corpus Christi that could handle emergency repairs for the vessels that rode out the storm. And it cost me personally. Last October, Tony had his homecoming game, starting linebacker, senior year, his last season under the Friday Night Lights. I was supposed to be there, had the date circled on my calendar for months. Maria had already arranged to leave work early. Then at 3 p.m. on that Friday, the Gulf trader limped in with a cracked propeller shaft and flooding in the engine compartment. Emergency dry dock situation, no choice. Maria recorded the entire game on her phone. My wife, a school administrator at Galveston ISD who married a welder who became something more but never stopped working, like he had everything to prove. She held that phone up in the bleachers for 2.5 hours so I could watch it later. Tony scored on an interception in the third quarter, picked it off at the 40, and ran it back 60 yards untouched. I watched that clip in my office at 2 a.m., still wearing coveralls, hydraulic fluid on my boots, the sharp smell of cutting torch smoke in my hair. I watched it 9 times. I've missed more of Tony's games than I've attended. The yard always needed me, or so I told myself. Someone always had an emergency. Someone always needed the Vincent touch, but Maria never complained, never made me choose. She understood that the work wasn't just a job for me. It was proof of something I couldn't quite name. Maria's the reason I'm not just a Navy guy with a good job. She's the reason I own the ground Bradford Pierce just fired me from. In 2010, the Marine Services Company that had operated the dry dock facility went through bankruptcy liquidation after the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Insurance claims, environmental liability, contractor defaults, the whole industry took a beating that year. The court put the entire property up for auction through a supervised bankruptcy sale. 45 acres of prime waterfront, including the deepwater dry dock, repair bays, parts warehouse, and fuel depot. I'd been watching that auction listing for months. I knew what that land was worth to anyone who needed to operate heavy marine equipment on this stretch of coast. More important, I knew what it was worth to Gulf Shore Industrial specifically. They'd been leasing it for years, but they'd never bothered to buy it outright. Corporate thinking, why tie up capital in real estate when you can lease it as an operating expense? I called Earl Thompson on a Tuesday evening in November. Earl's 61 years old, practices maritime and property law out of a 2-room office in Galveston with a ceiling fan that wobbles in stacks of legal references on every flat surface. He's known me since I bought my first house, a 3-bedroom ranch off Highway 146. That Maria and I purchased the year Tony was born. Earl's the kind of lawyer who keeps a copy of everything in a fireproof filing cabinet and never raises his voice because he doesn't have to. Earl, I said, I want to buy the marine facility. Silence on the phone for about 10 seconds, then Vincent, that's a 45-acre industrial property. The minimum bid's going to be close to $1 million. I know. You know what you're getting into? I've been running that facility for Gulf Shore for 12 years. I know every pipe, every electrical circuit, every structural beam. I know what it's worth. Earl set up Bayou Industrial Holdings LLC the next week. Registered in Louisiana, managing member Vincent S. Castillo, he walked me through the corporate structure, the liability protection, the tax implications. Most important, he made sure the LLC could legally bid on the property without any conflicts of interest with my employment at Gulf Shore. I used my savings for the down payment. $280,000, every penny I'd put away since joining the Navy at 18. Money from deployments, hazard pay, re-enlistment bonuses, and 20 years of living below my means. Maria and I took a second mortgage on the house for the additional financing. The night before I signed those loan documents, I sat at the kitchen table with Maria, going through the numbers one more time. The risk was real. If the auction went wrong, if I overbid, if the property had environmental issues I didn't know about, we could lose everything. How much do we need? She asked, looking at the bank paperwork spread across the table. $320,000 total, plus closing costs. She looked at the auction listing, looked at me and said, then let's do it. That was it. No lecture about risk management. No demand for guarantees, just quiet confidence in a decision we were making together. Maria's always been like that. She sees the big picture while I'm focused on the technical details. The auction was held on a cold Thursday morning in December 2010 at the Galveston County Courthouse. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for my father's funeral 3 years earlier. Earl sat beside me with a folder full of financing documents and bid authorization forms. There were 6 other bidders. 2 commercial development companies, 1 environmental remediation firm, and 3 individuals I didn't recognize. The auctioneer started the bidding at $500,000. It climbed quickly to $750,000, then 800,000. One by one, the other bidders dropped out as it passed 900,000. At $950,000, it was just me and a development company from Dallas. They bid $975,000. I looked at Earl. He nodded. $1 million, I said. The Dallas company shook their heads and walked away. Sold to bidder number 7 for $1 million. Total purchase price, $100,000 for 45 acres of waterfront property and a deep water marine facility that had cost $28 million to build in 1998. The smartest investment anyone on the Texas coast made that year. Nobody noticed because Vincent Castillo doesn't look like the kind of man who makes million-dollar investments. The paperwork took 6 weeks to finalize. Title search, environmental assessments, financing approval, insurance policies. Earl handled all of it while I kept working at Gulf Shore, managing the same facility I now owned. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was paying myself rent through the corporate structure, then paying it back to the LLC. Earl structured the ground lease agreement between my LLC and Gulf Shore Industrial. Bayou Industrial Holdings as lessor, Gulf Shore Industrial Group as lessee. Fair market rate of $78,000 per month, which was actually less than what they'd been paying the previous owner. Their accounting department was happy to continue sending the monthly check to my LLC. To them, it was just a vendor payment, a line item in the facility's budget. But Earl insisted on including a specific clause in that lease agreement. Section 6.4 buried in the termination provisions on page 14 of a 22-page document. He read it to me over the phone the night he drafted it, his voice flat and careful the way it gets when he's writing something that really matters. In the event the lessee terminates the employment of any individual who is a managing member or beneficial owner of the lessor entity due to discriminatory practices, age bias, or military status discrimination, the lessor may terminate this lease upon 14 calendar days written notice, and all penalty provisions of Section 19.6 shall apply. I was quiet for a minute, thinking it through. What are the penalties in 19.6? Holdover damages at 300% of monthly rent, plus legal fees, plus loss of use compensation based on replacement facility costs. Write it in. Vincent, you'll probably never need this clause. Gulf Shore values you. Write it in anyway. The lease was executed in February 2011. Gulf Shore's then CFO signed it with full corporate authority. It's been legally valid and enforceable for 13 years. Nobody in current management has ever read it. Why would they? The rent gets paid automatically. The facility works. The man who runs it shows up every morning at 5:30 and leaves after dark. Nobody looks twice at the foundation when the building's still standing. The manila folder I carried into that conference room with Bradford was my copy of the lease agreement. I brought it because I already knew what was coming. 3 days before Thursday's firing, Danny Morales texted me at 11:15 p.m. Danny's my yard foreman, been working under me for 18 years. Started as a rigger when I was assistant superintendent, worked his way up to running day-to-day operations. Barrel-chested, sunburned, permanent from decades on the water, hands like catcher's mitts. The kind of man who doesn't say much but remembers everything and sees all the angles. His text was 2 sentences. Emergency HR meeting scheduled Thursday 2 p.m. Watch your 6. I read it sitting on the edge of my bed, Maria already asleep beside me. Gus, our Catahoula mix, lifted his head from the foot of the bed and watched me with one blue eye, one brown. I got up, walked to the closet, opened the fireproof safe bolted to the floor behind Maria's winter coats. Inside the safe, the original auction receipt stamped by the Galveston County clerk, the ground lease agreement, the LLC articles of incorporation, my DD 214 from the Navy, the deed to our house, and a photo of my CB unit from a construction project in Okinawa in 1996. 22 young faces in hard hats and work boots, building airfield facilities 8,000 miles from home. I took out the lease agreement, set it in the manila folder, and put the folder by the front door next to my work boots. Then I went back to bed and slept better than I had in weeks. Funny how clarity feels once you stop pretending you don't know what's coming. Walking out of Gulf Shore's building that Thursday afternoon, I crossed the yard one last time as an employee. Word travels fast in a place like this. The crew had seen me go into the corporate building at 2 p.m., seen me come out 20 minutes later with a manila folder and a look they'd never seen before. Hard hats turned as I passed. A welder on the Coastal Ranger killed his arc and lifted his hood to watch me walk by. Danny was standing by the main gate, arms folded across his chest, jaw set so tight I could see the muscle working under his ear. He'd been my right hand for 18 years, knew this place almost as well as I did. We looked at each other for about 10 seconds. Neither of us spoke. Some things don't need words between men who've worked side by side through 2 major hurricanes and more emergency repairs than either of us could count. I stopped at the gate and looked back one more time. The dry dock stretching 400 feet into the channel, the cranes I'd rebuilt and modernized, the keel blocks I'd poured and leveled with my own hands, the fuel depot humming with diesel that kept 27 vessels operating across the Gulf, the repair bays where my crew turned out work that passed Coast Guard inspection every single time, my dry dock, my land, my name on the deed filed in Galveston County for 13 years. I almost smiled. Then I got in my truck, a 2011 F-250 white, with rust creeping along the wheel wells from years of salt air, 180,000 miles on the odometer. Set the manila folder on the passenger seat where my hard hat usually rides and drove home. Bradford Pierce had just fired the man who owned the ground under his feet. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Friday, Bradford sent a company-wide email. Danny forwarded it to me without comment, just a screenshot, no words needed. Team, exciting transformation ahead. Gulf Shore Industrial is embracing the future of marine operations through our strategic partnership with Digital Marine Solutions. This innovative approach will reduce operational costs by 35% and position us as a cutting-edge marine services provider. We're moving beyond legacy infrastructure to create a truly modern, globally competitive operation. More details to follow as we implement our digital roadmap. Bradford Pierce, Chief Executive Officer. He CC'd the entire board of directors. Post as did on the company's LinkedIn page with hashtags about innovation and transformation. By noon that same Friday, Bradford had moved into my office. Danny told me that later, his voice tight with anger he rarely shows. Said Bradford had maintenance remove the framed photos I'd hung over 20 years, crew portraits from major projects, vessel launching ceremonies where we'd done the prep work, Hurricane Harvey response commendations from the Coast Guard and local emergency management, the photo of my CB unit that I'd kept on my desk since 2003. 20 years of a working life taken off the walls and stacked in a cardboard box in the hallway like office supplies being cleared out. Bradford replaced them with a whiteboard, wrote Innovation Pipeline across the top in blue marker and drew 3 empty columns underneath, left them blank, waiting for inspiration to strike. That Friday evening around 7:30, my phone rang. Danny again. You sitting down? I was at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. Maria was cleaning up after dinner. Tony was upstairs doing homework with music playing low through the ceiling. Go ahead. I was outside his office about an hour ago delivering the weekly safety report. Door was cracked open. He was on a video call with someone, probably one of the board members, laughing about something. Danny paused. I could hear him breathing, could feel the anger radiating through the phone. He said, and I'm telling you his exact words, the old man acted like I was dismantling his life's work. It's a dry dock, not the Sistine Chapel. He's a Navy guy who never left the 1990s. Trust me, nobody's going to miss the grease and the diesel fumes. This is what modern business looks like. Silence on the line except for the hum of our refrigerator and Tony's music upstairs. Then he said, by next quarter we'll have full automation and predictive analytics running the whole operation remotely. These military types never understand that experience isn't the same thing as innovation. I didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Just listened to Danny's breathing and processed what Bradford really thought about 20 years of work. Thanks for letting me know. Vincent, I thought you needed to hear exactly what kind of man we're dealing with. I hung up and set the phone face down on the table. Maria had stopped wiping down the counter and was watching me with the expression she gets when she already knows something important has happened and is waiting for me to catch up. He thinks I'm finished, I said. Are you? I looked at the manila folder sitting on the counter where I'd left it that morning. Earl Thompson's business card was tucked inside the front cover, right behind the lease agreement that was about to change everything. No. Friday morning, 7:15 a.m., I drove out to the marina at Clear Lake and parked facing the water. Engine off, windows cracked to let in the salt air. The morning was warm and still, smelling of marsh grass and diesel fuel from the shrimp boats heading out to the Gulf. I called Earl Thompson. He picked up on the second ring, always at his desk by 7 a.m., has been for 30 years. Earl, he fired me yesterday afternoon. Quiet on the line, not surprised quiet. Thinking quiet, Earl doesn't waste breath on reactions when there's work to be done. Section 6.4, Section 6.4. Military discrimination, called me a Navy guy stuck in the past in front of witnesses. I'll have the termination notice drafted and hand-delivered to their corporate office by noon today. Certified mail, return receipt. 14 calendar days, Vincent. That's what the lease gives them. I watched a pelican work the shallows near the dock, patient and methodical, waiting for the right moment to strike. One more thing, Earl. I want you to call Atlantic Fleet Services in Houston. Tell them I'm ready to discuss that standing offer they've had on the table, the exclusive service contract, the whole package. Facility lease, fleet maintenance, my services as Director of Operations. Tell them I can deliver a fully operational deep water facility with an experienced crew, no waiting list, immediate availability. I'll make that call within the hour. By noon that Friday, a courier walked into the lobby of Gulf Shore Industrial's corporate headquarters carrying a legal envelope from the law offices of Earl T. Thompson, maritime attorney, Galveston, Texas. The receptionist signed for it, didn't recognize the sender, and routed it to the legal department. It sat in Helen Ward's inbox for exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes. Helen's Gulf Shore's general counsel, 44 years old, sharp, thorough, not part of the Pierce family dynasty. She's the kind of lawyer who reads every word of every document because she learned early that the words people skip are the ones that destroy companies. She opened the envelope at 2:43 p.m. and read the notice twice. Lease termination from Bayou Industrial Holdings, LLC, citing Section 6.4 of the ground lease agreement, effective in 14 calendar days. Attached was a certified copy of the LLC's Articles of Organization showing Vincent S. Castillo as managing member and the recorded deed from Galveston County showing the LLC as property owner. Helen didn't recognize the company name. She assumed it was a vendor dispute, maybe a billing issue, the kind of thing that gets resolved with a phone call. She pulled the original lease file from record storage, a thick folder gathering dust for 13 years. She found the lease agreement and turned to Section 6.4. Read it once, then again, then a third time with her finger tracing each word. She went to her computer, pulled up the Texas Secretary of State's website, typed in Bayou Industrial Holdings, LLC. The filing appeared in seconds. Managing member, Vincent S. Castillo, registered agent. Earl T. Thompson, Galveston. Helen Ward did not move for a full minute. The name sat there on her screen in plain black text. Vincent S. Castillo. The man Bradford Pierce had fired 24 hours earlier owned the ground they were all standing on. She turned to Section 19.6, penalty provisions for early lease termination, ran the numbers twice because she didn't trust her own calculations. Holdover damages at 300% of monthly rent, legal fees and court costs. Loss of use compensation based on replacement facility rental rates. The penalties alone came to $8.5 million. That was before calculating the cost of relocating 27 vessels to alternative facilities that didn't exist within 250 miles. She picked up her phone and called the owner's emergency line. Mr. Pierce, we have a critical situation. The marine facility. We don't own it. We've been leasing it for 13 years, and the owner just terminated our lease. The owner is Vincent Castillo. The emergency board meeting convened at 4:30 p.m. in the main conference room. Bradford sat at the head of the table, his innovation whiteboard visible through the glass wall behind him, still showing 3 empty columns under innovation pipeline. Helen stood at the far end with her laptop open and the lease file spread in front of her like evidence at a trial. What exactly are you telling us? Came the voice through the speakerphone. The company founder, Bradford's grandfather, calling in from his retirement home in Scottsdale. Helen repeated it all. The LLC ownership, the lease termination clause, the 14-day notice period, the penalty calculations. Vincent Castillo owned the property. The lease had a termination trigger based on discriminatory firing. Gulf Shore Industrial had exactly 12 days remaining to vacate the only marine facility their fleet could use. Bradford's face went white, then red, then back to white. There has to be a way to challenge this legally. He was an employee. Employees can't own company assets. Helen looked at him with the expression reserved for people who ask if they can represent themselves in federal court. He doesn't own company assets. He owns his assets. We're the tenants, and we just lost our lease because you fired the landlord. Then we'll find another dry dock facility. The nearest facility with deep water capacity and Coast Guard certification is in Mobile, Alabama. That's 280 miles. They have a 9-month waiting list for routine maintenance, 6 weeks minimum for emergency repairs. Our fleet inspection schedule requires monthly dry dock access. Without this facility, we can't legally operate a single vessel. The room went quiet. Not conference room quiet, morgue quiet, the air conditioning hummed. Bradford's LinkedIn post from that morning about embracing digital transformation was still pinned at the top of his profile. The founder's voice came through the speaker, low and hard. Bradford, what have you done? Bradford opened his mouth. No words came out. Leave the room. Bradford stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out. His white sneakers squeaked on the polished concrete floor, a small, ridiculous sound in a room full of silence and corporate ruin. 3 days later, I signed an exclusive service agreement with Atlantic Fleet Services. The CEO flew down from Houston personally, didn't send a lawyer or a vice president. We met in Earl's office on a Tuesday afternoon. The deal: $47 million over 5 years for exclusive use of the marine facility. Vincent Castillo named VP of Fleet Operations, overseeing all maintenance and Coast Guard compliance for their 31-vessel fleet. The contract included a no-compete clause, no Gulf Shore industrial vessels permitted to use the facility for the duration of the agreement. The Atlantic Pioneer, a 380-foot container vessel due for annual inspection, was the first ship to enter my dry dock under the new arrangement. My crew guided her in at dawn on a Thursday morning, 10 days after Bradford Pierce fired me. Danny ran the operation from the dock wall, calling positions over the radio in the steady voice I'd heard for 18 years. The ballast pumps hummed. The keel blocks took her weight. Welding arcs lit up the hull before the sun cleared the horizon. My yard was running again, just not for Gulf Shore. Bradford's black BMW pulled into my parking lot at 8:15 a.m. on the following Tuesday. I watched him from the dock wall, where I was overseeing the Pioneer's propeller inspection. He got out slowly, no entourage, no lawyer, just a young man walking across gravel toward a facility he'd thought he controlled. We met near the fuel depot. The air smelled of diesel and salt water and the sharp metallic bite of cutting torches working steel. Bradford looked different, smaller somehow. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that might have been understanding. "Vincent, I made a mistake. The board voted me out yesterday. I'm asking for a lease. Any terms, I'll pay whatever you want." I looked at him for a long moment. The kid who'd called me outdated, who thought 20 years of hands-on experience was less valuable than an MBA and a PowerPoint presentation about digital transformation. "I would if I could, Bradford, but the exclusive agreement with Atlantic Fleet says otherwise. Your strategic thinking made sure I was free to sign it." He nodded slowly, like a man absorbing a hit he saw coming, but hoped would miss somehow. "You were the best decision this company ever made," he said quietly. I just couldn't see it. He stood there for another minute, looking past me at the dry dock. The Pioneer secured in the bay, my crew working with the precision that comes from decades of experience. The yard alive and productive, just wearing different colors on the invoices. Then he walked back to his car and drove away. Within 6 weeks of losing access to the facility, Gulf Shore Industrial's entire operation collapsed. Vessels couldn't be inspected, certified, or repaired. Insurance coverage lapsed. Clients moved their contracts to Atlantic Fleet Services, which had the dock, the crew, and the man who knew how to run both. The company Bradford's grandfather built from a single tugboat in 1971 sold for 28 cents on the dollar after 52 years in business. The buyer was a private equity firm that stripped the fleet and sold the vessels individually at auction. Bayou Industrial Holdings LLC collected $53 million total from lease penalties and the Atlantic Fleet contract. I paid off our house, completely established Tony's college fund, and bought Maria the Tahoe she never asked for but deserved after 20 years of supporting a man who worked too much and worried constantly about providing enough. Friday evening, late September, warm Gulf air and golden lights spilling across the water. I'm sitting in my truck at the top of the dock wall, windows down, watching my crew finish up for the week. The Pioneer sits in the bay below, fresh paint gleaming, ready to return to service. My phone buzzes on the dashboard. "Tony, Dad, you coming to the game tonight? Front row, just like I promised. You said that last time. I'm already heading to the truck." This time is different. He hangs up without saying goodbye, the way 17-year-olds do when they're trying not to sound too excited that their old man might actually show up. I start the engine and back away from the water. Through my rearview mirror, the Gulf stretches flat and endless beyond the facility I've owned for 13 years and managed for 20. Some men try to build empires with algorithms and automation, with PowerPoint presentations and digital transformation initiatives. I built mine on 45 acres of waterfront and the knowledge that steel and concrete and skilled hands create something that lasts. If you've ever been called outdated by someone who couldn't do your job for 5 minutes, hit that like button and subscribe. And if you've got a story about patience paying off when everyone thought you were finished, share it in the comments below. Sometimes the best revenge is simply knowing what you're worth and making sure everyone else finds out eventually.